I've noticed a complete misuse of generative AI.
Sometimes it'll generate something that doesn't exist.
It's a dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing.
And who's liable for that? That's a question in AI world that, no one knows. Has the theme music played yet? I think we need some fake theme music on this side so I know the cue. We're talking about generative AI.
The hot buzz.
Oh, that's pretty trendy. We're going to cover slightly AI in general because that's been around for, I think, longer than what generative AI has been around for.
But to start with, generative AI is fantastic.
Love it.
Unbelievable. It's one of the first technology, and every now and again this happens, that I use and I go, whoa,
yeah,
that's a game changer.
It's a feat of technology recently.
I say, put everything into one string or something like that,
yeah.
and it does it.
Yeah.
So, I was going to have to go move all of this text and do it. I did it for me.
A very mundane task made easy.
I've noticed a complete misuse of generative AI. So a lot of people say to use it for creativity and all of these other sort of everyone's got their own spin on it.
Yeah.
But my biggest thing is of a recent job position that we've been advertising, I put up an ad and had about 500 applicants.
Yeah.
And of these 500 applicants, around 50 had literally the same paragraphs. I kid you not, the same word for word.
Oh, not even just structure.
No, it says something like resonates -- which I never see. And you read it and you go, why would they do this? Because I'm trying to pick the best applicant, someone unique, someone that fit the job ad. And people have given me the same content, the same cover letter. And my biggest thing is, if you want to stand out, do you really think going to the same ChatGPT or Perplexity or
any of these
whatever,
AI
whatever generative AI flavor
Gemini,
you buy? Yeah, exactly. Do you think if you go generate it, that you're going to stand out to someone like me reading every single cover letter?
I think people don't realize you can definitely use the features of rewriting what has been generated for you. So it's generated and they're like, oh yeah, rewrite it to make it sound more professional. Rewrite it to make it sound more cool or whatever. However, AI, or generative AI at least right now, hasn't learned how to not waffle. So unless you're really editing what is being generated, then you're going to have a bunch of waffle, and it's very easy for the general person, or maybe a bit more of a technical person, to look at it and go, this is not what someone would say, and this is not how someone would say it.
Exactly. So for example, we're in Australia.
Yeah.
We don't spell the word optimize with a Z.
No.
And a whole bunch of other words, they're with an S. So if I'm receiving an email, sometimes you see the odd Z in Australia. Someone miswrote a spell check, corrected incorrectly, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you see a whole email with Z's, you go, they generated this. And for me, as a person that I'm having a conversation with someone, if I'm getting these generic responses, I'm thinking, why are they giving me generic responses? This isn't a conversation. If I call them up, they're not talking all this weird chat.
Yeah, but see, I agree with you 100%, like the Z's and the little tiny Q's, when I say Q's, C-U-E, like Q's in the grammar, but there's just, even reading the general waffle, they basically mirror back exactly what you've said to them. And that's what AI is great at doing. But when they copy and paste it, let's say you're saying this is a job position for an administration role and it will entail bookkeeping and operations roles, then the cover letter says, I'm very interested in this administration role that you're advertising at Sanico Software.
Exactly, that's how it sounded.
And that's what generative AI will generate, and there will be probably 50% of it that sounds fairly good. But until you edit it down, it's just mirroring things, and it has no context.
But again, you don't need to edit it down. You can generate something, can say that it's creative, but I think most people can be creative. Some people disagree, but I think most people have a flair, their own personality. So when you go to write an email, sure, you can try and, like you would use a thesaurus.
Right.
You would say, oh, what's a better word than X,
what's
whatever.
A synonym for
what's
this?
a synonym for this? And then, okay, that sounds more professional.
Sure.
Cool. We've been having those tools. So generative AI is a better way to kind of use a thesaurus for a sentence.
Yeah, but I even remember, and it was in an episode of Friends, Joey wanted to sound smarter when they were submitting adoption papers, and they were like, what did you say here, Joey? And he went and used the thesaurus that Ross had taught him, but he used it on every single word. So he was like, as a Homo sapien with a beating heart, and what he was really trying to say is a human with a deep emotion. So it's like, that's what is happening with AI. It's generating things that it shouldn't necessarily generate on, and now you're sounding not authentic.
Exactly, and most of those models aren't trained specific to Australian language, so then you would have to say sound Australian. And as an example, I tried this the other day. I said make it sound Australian, and it turned the email to, "How you going, mate?" This stereotypical. I said back racist? To it, "Are you racist?" You put me in the kettle of fish and say we all speak like that. It was the most extreme end, not like talk professionally how we talk in Australia. So yeah, what I really want to talk about is the better uses of generative AI.
Yeah,
it's not a bad tool, but for example, from a software perspective, a lot of software people are writing code with it. Now that's cool.
Things like Copilot on GitHub.
Sure, there's a whole bunch of tools.
A bunch of tools that it's just everywhere now.
But from a presentation we did at UniSA the other day, I was talking to young people and I said, if you're coming out of university without fundamental skills and all your homework was done by generative AI, you didn't have time to self-contemplate and break down a problem, you don't even use your brain anymore, you just say, solve this problem.
Yeah.
You're going to come out of university and rob yourself of an education. Don't go to uni. Just start prompting. And the problem is they don't realize the limitations of generative AI for software. Now, I don't want to go too much into software. I'm just saying that I can see a complete misuse of generative AI in my field already.
Well, I mean, I think this problem's been around predating generative AI, even predating AI. I remember when I was younger, I was in not even high school. I was in primary school, and someone said, you need to write a report based on, I don't know, Egyptian stuff. And so I looked up this website on Google and I started copying word for word. And then they were like, no, we need it in your own words. I was like, what do you mean? These are my words that I've written down. And they're like, no, you have to read it and come up with it yourself. Or beyond that, as I got into high school, let's just say, I was watching a YouTube video and copying what people were saying. Now, I wasn't doing this all the time, but you can still copy resources that are out there that have been generated by someone else.
Sure.
AI is just meant to try and say, all right, I'm uniquely generated. But, you can always misuse tools that are out there because Google, YouTube, all of these tools are meant to actually better your research. Oh, great. A new resource, a book, a new resource. And then
a citable source.
Exactly. And then you have an opinion about it. But the issue is, and it's also become prevalent in generative AI, is that no one's having their opinion about it. No one's having their authentic view on what's being generated. They're just using what's there. So for the lazy people, it's become convenient. And that's the issue, because convenience was always there with, Google or YouTube, but it was still a bit hard. You had to scribe it down. Now, it's pulling from a YouTube video and it's generating for you sounding a little bit unique, but not really. So those people are suffering even more, even though they think they're getting away with more.
But even to your point, when I was younger, I think I was like 8. I remember they said, do this assignment. So I went straight to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I was like, fantastic. It says everything that it needs to say. So in my wisdom of 8 years old, and this is what I want to talk about, being naive, I wasn't taught how to write a report at that point. Or write it well. So I thought someone showed me Google. I started using Google.
Fantastic tool.
And so I copied from Wikipedia, and all those little citation squares. I kept them.
Yeah.
I didn't edit.
On Wikipedia at the bottom where it shows their citation. Oh, you're like, sentence.
No, literally in the sentence, like where it cites it.
Yeah.
The whole sentence citation.
Yeah.
I copied
that.
That's
my citation now.
The teacher came up to me and said, you copied from Wikipedia. And I was like, how did she know? But then I didn't really see anything wrong with it. I was like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
And they said, well, you got to write this yourself. You got to have your own thoughts or your own words. Otherwise, you're not learning.
Yeah.
And that's when I understood, don't copy from Wikipedia. And I moved on and started writing reports myself.
Yeah. Well, it's the classic, And what I was basically saying, but put into an analogy, you've got a knife. Do you use it to butter bread or cut things nicely to prepare meals, or are you using it to murder people?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's just this tool, especially what really surprised me with the job ad that I put out, is I didn't realize how much adoption of ChatGPT and other tools, generative AI in general.
Yeah.
There's so many people using it.
I mean, I guess you shouldn't be shocked that the people who are still looking for a job are using it, because they're probably not getting the jobs and continuing to use it.
Sure. And I understand people doing like the shotgun method, trying to apply for as many as possible. And I get it's hard as a job seeker, but I got to say, if you're really trying to stand out, you got to do something a little bit different. You got to have your own voice. And that's what I was looking for in cover letters and even resumes. Not that I look too much at that, but mostly cover letters, and see the unique voice. And if someone's going to match our culture, and then go from there, give them a call, interview them. But straight off the bat, if it's the same paragraph I read 50 times, then I'm looking for someone unique. I can't interview 500 people. I don't have the capacity.
Well, listen, I don't want to get off topic too much, because this is all about AI, but I want to show like an example of a contrasting thing where, my own partner, for example, she was going for a new job. She applied to a new department and never seen these people before, thought, they don't really know me that well. I've chucked my resume in and made it unique. But she thought, they're still in the same building. They're people, they're just normal people. She's in the nursing field. And so she went down to the level, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, my name is, and nice to meet you. I applied for the job. I would love to work here," but and tried to get to know them a little bit. Wasn't pushy. And suddenly they said, "What was your name again? Let me," and then they bookmarked her resume. Sure. And suddenly she got the interview. So I'm not saying you need to do that every time, but the contrast there with the generative AI and applying for, those positions is, she thought a bit more dynamically. She thought, what would these people want? They want people skills, personable skills.
Yeah, exactly. And my point is, there's so many good uses for generative AI. So I want to talk about them.
Yeah, let's go
One
into that.
is automating, well, from a software perspective, automating very low-level, boring tasks. Stuff that you used to do and write like this script.
Yeah.
And it was so boring. It's just the worst thing.
Yeah.
Now you can generate it. It's sort of like, what I picture is this throwaway script that I need for a purpose.
Yeah.
I finish that purpose and I'm not using that script again. Maybe I'll look back at it, but I'm not using it. And I think you could, whoever's listening, think about your own field and say, what are those sorts of tasks?
I mean, sometimes we need filler text, which has no reasoning to need to actually make sense. People use lorem ipsum, if you've ever seen it.
Sure.
So if you want to not just use gobbledygook text, you can say, generate me 5 sentences based on this, and it's going to be replaced with authentic content.
Sure.
So that's even just a very simple, mundane use.
And that's my other point. Automating tasks that are that low level, boring thing that you don't want to do, but not the main job. Like, for example, if you're a reporter, maybe you can use it to find the next part that I want to talk about. Research. It's a great tool. It's almost a better Google. So good that Google's putting it in their Google search at the moment. So at the very top, generative AI has spilled into their own product.
Yeah, they panicked because all those other platforms are doing very good.
Yeah, exactly. And I can understand it. You're finding resources better and it still links out. Cool. But it's a really good research tool. So
yes,
research tool, automating low-level tasks, boring tasks.
Something like Perplexity, for example, and we have no affiliation with these products, but someone like Perplexity, who is a platform that does generative AI, but it also is really good at research-based queries. And you can say, query it on general public knowledge, query it on research papers, and it's the same as trying to go to Google Scholar, I guess, and searching up a topic, but instead it's going to scour through those reports, and it's much easier to find things.
Another point that I want to make is, we're website developers. We make web apps. We make websites. A lot of people go to websites like Square or other similar platforms, and they have a website within the day. This isn't custom. It was built by them.
Yeah.
Generic, same theme as 1,000 other people. One client in particular, we were reviewing their current website, and I looked at their theme, and I'm like, this is a very used theme. I went and looked on the internet because you can look at Google searches in a particular way. And I found 1,000 sites and sent it to them saying, look at all of these similar ones. How are you going to stand out if all of your competition is looking the same? So think that with generative AI, if I'm generating this and it's going to look the exact same as everyone else's, how am I standing out? Yeah. And I just think it's just a complete misuse of the technology. And I keep warning young people, you're robbing yourself, like especially in an educational context, if you're not using it properly. And I think I was speaking to someone at the state government of South Australia that works in the education department. They were saying to me, we're making a push to try and ban it. I think that's the way. And I said, you can't ban it. Look, when Google came around and you could copy off Wikipedia, did you ban it? And before that, you would get a book and then someone would manually get a typewriter and type what was in that book. So there's
even
always
America tried to ban alcohol back in what was it, in the 1900s, huh? And prohibition. And what did people do? Bootleg.
Exactly. So there's this mentality that let's just stamp it out and completely ban it. I don't think that's the way. I think showing people how to use it properly. And the problem is a lot of people don't know how to use it properly, and there's still debate. We're using it in different ways and finding out how we can use it in our daily tasks.
Well, to make it even clearer, people still don't know, but it was back in high school when one of my IT teachers was trying to teach us. People still don't know how to query Google properly with keywords and ways to find the article that you're looking for. And so our teacher back then, it was a great class, he was going through, keywords. But I remember students weren't focusing. They weren't too interested. They were like, it's Google. Just search up what you're looking for. But someone like our auntie, or a family relative that might be in their 60s, is searching up an entire sentence. How do I do this, and this?
Which generative AI has become good at understanding.
That's right. So, but then generative AI as well, since maybe it's more catered to sentence formatted questions, there are also ways to prompt it to be better. Now, that's where it's given birth to prompt engineers.
I just don't like that term. But anyway, yes.
But beyond that, I guess if I'm taking a positive out of that, it's that there is correct ways or better ways to prompt it to get what you want faster.
Sure, and I can agree with that. That just like with Google, like in a particular search, if I'm searching, for example, I like a programming language called Elixir, I would say Elixir and then the query, and it's the exact same type of search I'm doing in Google, but it's able to find that place in the documentation a lot faster, and then I go read it. And that's what I'm using it for in a major way. That I use Perplexity. I think it's a fabulous, fantastic, well-made tool.
Yeah.
Great idea, well executed. I'm not getting paid to say this. Perplexity is just great.
It's a good tool.
I use it as a daily driver, and sometimes Google is better for like a basic search when I'm finding a direct company or even just some other types of searches. It's just better in Google.
You want to see citable resources immediately rather than reading something that's generated.
I'll write in something like, hey, how do you do this in the documentation for Elixir function? It'll find it. I'll go read the documentation if necessary. But it summarizes it quite nicely. I can double check. I can verify. That's great. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Generative AI is a cool new accomplishment. We don't need to ban it.
If you're looking at it in our particular field of software, and I don't want to get too specific for people who aren't software technical, I mean, there's ways to write in certain languages. Let's say Elixir was a language, and there's syntactical ways to write a certain statement of code. And so you look at their documentation and you say, okay, this is how they want us to write it. That's the certain standard. I'm going to write it now. But the thing is, if you're using generative AI to say, hey, Perplexity or ChatGPT, can you show me how to do this in Elixir? And it's a custom request that you're making. Like, how can I create this certain functionality? Sometimes it'll generate something that doesn't exist.
Yes.
And that's
hallucinating.
Dangerous. It's hallucinating. It's taking an educated guess based on the documentation it sees, and maybe other resources outside of the documentation, could be blog posts, things that aren't vetted correctly, and it's assuming that this can be done. And you go, oh, great, that's a function I didn't see that existed. Copy, paste, put it into your program. Why is it not working? What do you mean? What do you mean this doesn't exist? And you go down a rabbit hole of going in circles. But really, you have to still look at what it generates. So I'm not saying don't generate things that looks up documentation in software. That's a fantastic tool. I use it because sometimes documentation sucks. It's hard to read. So then you want it to maybe make it a bit more explainable. But if it's going to spit out generated code for you, that's where it gets dangerous.
That's right. Especially if it's critical code or something that,
Yes.
you know, we talk about cyber attacks and
Yes.
you see it all in the news. There's certain things you have to do to ensure the code's safe. And even then, you know, there's some clever people that like to try and find a workaround and destroy a system or even just steal information.
I mean, you could put a metal fence around an entire house. It could still be broken into.
But when you're generating code and you cannot explain it, it's a dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing. So yeah, I think there's going to be a bit more policing around it in the future, just because a lot of people, I think it's going to just cause more problems than it is going to solve.
Well,
problems.
these sorts of software AI systems are integrated into bigger industries. You know, software, okay, we're in the software world, but it's actually in industries like, you know, concreting or, you know, industrial places where there's heavy machinery, and that can be dangerous. So we're not also talking about cyber attacks. We're talking about incorrectly written software that can really screw with people. It can damage lives. It can be, you know, dangerous on a fatal level outside of intangibility of software. It's now tangible. And who's liable for that? That's a question in AI world that, you know, no one knows. Back then I was reading research papers in university, and just to make it quick, it was talking about pilots and AI in defense. And who, if the AI system's taking control, sort of like an autopilot, but it's doing artificial intelligence tasks, who's responsible if the plane crashes? Who are we blaming? Is it the AI? The AI isn't an entity. Is it the person who wrote the AI? Is it the pilot who maybe misused the AI? Lot of gray areas.
I think the concept is skin in the game. Who's culpable? Who's responsible? And that's going to be an interesting thing with more automative tools like this. Who's responsible? The company, the individual that generated that goobity-gok. So I think that really rounds off our discussion. So the whole gist of it is generative AI can be used for excellent, good purposes that really help you.
It's great
to research, to automate low-level tasks. It's excellent.
Yes.
The misuse is terrible, and I think we should, as a society, be talking about ways that we can teach people how to use it appropriately.
I mean, it's two ends of a spectrum. You've got the end of not using it at all, and you're just not using a tool that's fantastic in front of you. That's silly. And then there's the other end where you're misusing it and not realizing, you know, it is not the source of truth. You know, you have to have your own authentic opinion. Finding that medium in between is the most important part. And I think we can do that. So
advocates of using generative AI for the right purposes.
Definitely. We are not against. And just think twice before you copy and paste something and what you're copying and pasting it for.